You may have seen it. They tried to take God out of schools, out of government, out of conversation. They said, a faith is outdated. Prayer is unnecessary. Church is irrelevant. But I've got good news for you. God is not finished. He's still on the throne. He's still healing. He's still saving. He's still saving. He's still making a way when there seems to be no way. God's presence cannot be erased by culture, politics, or public opinion. Throughout history, societies have attempted to marginalize or redefine the divine, yet God's presence remains steadfast and unchanging. Cultural shifts may influence societal norms and values, but they cannot diminish the essence of the divine. Political movements may seek to suppress religious expression, but they cannot extinguish the light of faith that burns within individuals. Public opinion may sway with the tides of popular thought, but it cannot alter the eternal truths that underpin spiritual belief. The New Yorker in every era. Challenges to faith have arisen, yet they have often led to a strengthening of conviction among believers. Attempts to silence or sideline religious perspectives have frequently resulted in a renewed commitment to spiritual principles. This resilience underscores the idea that the divine operates beyond the confines of human institutions and societal trends. Moreover, the enduring presence of God is evident in the lives of those who, despite external pressures, continue to live out their faith with integrity and compassion. Their actions serve as a testament to a higher power that guides and sustains them, regardless of the prevailing cultural or political climate. This persistent embodiment of spiritual values in daily life highlights the indelible nature of the divine in human experience. Ultimately, while cultural norms, political agendas, and public opinions may evolve, they cannot erase the presence of God. The divine transcends temporal changes, offering a constant source of hope, guidance, and purpose. This unchanging presence serves as a foundation upon which individuals can build lives of meaning and resilience, irrespective of external circumstances. What looks like the end is often just the beginning of God's greatest work. Life has a way of confronting us with moments that seem final. A door closes, a job is lost, a relationship breaks down, a dream crumbles, and in those moments it's easy to feel like we've come to the end of the road. The disappointment can feel overwhelming. The future can seem uncertain. The night can feel darker than ever before. But just because it looks like the end to us doesn't mean it's the end in God's eyes. In fact, it might be the very place where He's getting ready to begin something greater than we could ever imagine. God is a master of turning what looks like an ending into a brand new beginning. The Bible is full of stories that seem to end in tragedy, but were transformed by divine purpose. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers and sold into slavery. From a human perspective, that looked like the end of his dreams. But it was actually the start of God's plan to place him in a position of great influence, saving not just a nation, but his own family. When Moses fled Egypt after killing a man, it looked like his life was over. He became a shepherd in the wilderness for 40 years. But it was there in the obscurity and silence that God began preparing him to become a deliverer of his people. We often judge our lives by what we see on the surface. Our current circumstances, our past failures, the opinions of others. But God sees beyond the surface. He sees potential where we see problems. He sees opportunity in what looks like opposition. Just because something is falling apart doesn't mean it's over. Sometimes God has to allow something to end, not to punish us, but to prepare us. He's closing one chapter so he can begin writing the next, and this new chapter is filled with blessing, purpose, and destiny. Think about a seed. It has to be buried in the ground, hidden away, and seemingly lifeless. But in that dark place, something is happening. The seed is breaking open, making way for roots to grow and for new life to emerge. If someone didn't know better, they might look at that seed in the soil and think it was the end. But it's not the end, it's the beginning of growth. That's how God works. He uses what feels like burial as the setting for breakthrough. When Jesus died on the cross, all hope seemed lost. His followers scattered, his enemies mocked. The sky turned dark. From every natural viewpoint, it looked like the end of his mission, the end of his influence, the end of the story. But 3 days later, the stone was rolled away. Resurrection power filled the tomb. Death had been defeated. Death had been defeated. What looked like the end was actually the greatest beginning the world has ever known, the beginning of grace, redemption, and eternal hope. This principle still applies to our lives today. Maybe you've come through a season of loss. Maybe you're walking through a time of confusion, grief, or deep disappointment. It might feel like your story has come to a close, but don't mistake the middle for the end. Don't put a period where God has only placed a comma. He's still writing. He's still writing. He's still working. He's still turning ashes into beauty, mourning into joy, and despair into praise. God doesn't need ideal conditions to begin his work. He's not limited by your circumstances or defined by your past. In fact, he often begins his greatest work in the most unlikely places. Frit. When you think you've reached the end of your strength, that's when his strength shows up. When you've run out of options, that's when his wisdom steps in. When you feel empty and broken, that's when his grace overflows. If you're facing what feels like an ending, don't give up. Don't let fear or discouragement have the final word. Trust that God sees the full picture. He knows how to take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it for good. He knows how to open new doors you never saw coming. He knows how to write a better story than you ever imagined. Keep believing you ever imagined. Keep believing. Keep hoping, keep expecting, because what looks like the end is often just the beginning of God's greatest work. He's not finished with you. He's just getting started. And the best part of your story hasn't even been written yet. Even when God is pushed out, he's working behind the scenes. Ha ha. You may not see him. You may not hear his name on the news or in public conversation. You may watch as people reject his truth, ignore his presence, and build their lives around their own desires. But none of that stops God from moving. He's not limited by our decisions, not confined by human actions, and certainly not silenced by rejection. In fact, some of the most powerful moves of God happen when it looks like he's absent. While people think they've shut him out. He's working quietly, steadily, and powerfully behind the scenes. It's easy to think that silence means absence. When we don't see immediate evidence of God's hand, we assume he's not involved. But God often does his greatest work in hidden places. Just like a seed grows underground before it ever breaks through the surface, God often does his preparation where no one can see. He works in hearts before he works in headlines. He shifts things in the spiritual before they show up in the natural. And just because it's not visible doesn't mean it's not happening. There are times in life when everything feels like it's moving in the wrong direction. The culture turns away from God. Schools remove prayer. Leaders ignore spiritual values. Families are broken. Churches are shrinking. Faith seems outdated, and it can feel like the world is falling apart. But God is not intimidated by that. He's not pacing the floor of heaven trying to come up with a backup plan. He's still in control, and he's working in ways we don't yet understand. When Jesus was crucified, his disciples thought it was over. The one they believed in was now buried in a tomb. The streets were silent. The crowd had moved on. The movement appeared crushed. But while they were mourning in fear, God was at work behind the scenes. Jesus was defeating death, hell, and the grave. Heaven wasn't silent. It was setting the stage for resurrection. What looked like defeat was actually preparation for victory. That's how God works. You may not see him working in your family right now. Your children may have walked away from faith. Your spouse may be hardened. Your loved ones may have no interest in spiritual things. But don't give up. Just because it looks like God has been pushed out doesn't mean he's given up on them. He's still drawing hearts. He's still speaking in quiet moments. He's still orchestrating divine encounters. The prayers you've prayed are not forgotten. The tears you've cried have not been wasted. God is moving even if they can't see it yet. There are seasons when life feels quiet. No open doors. No answered prayers. No visible breakthroughs. But those are often the seasons when God is laying the groundwork for what's coming next. You may feel overlooked, but you're being prepared. You may feel stuck, but God is setting you up. David was anointed king as a young man, but then spent years in the wilderness before ever sitting on a throne. During those years, God was building his character, deepening his faith, and preparing him for what was ahead. What looked like a delay was actually divine development. Even in society, where God's truth is often resisted or replaced with other ideologies, he is still at work. Revival doesn't always start with a stadium. It often starts with one heart, one moment of surrender, one quiet act of obedience. While the headlines may focus on division and chaos, there are stories unfolding every day of lives being changed, addictions being broken, marriages being restored, and hope being found. God is not finished with this generation. He's preparing a people who will rise in love and power, in truth, not to condemn the world, but to shine in it. You may be in a place right now where you're wondering, well, where is God? The silence feels deafening. The waiting feels endless. But take heart, he's not absent. He's just operating behind the curtain. When a play is being prepared, the audience sees nothing but a closed curtain. But behind that curtain, actors are getting in place, sets are being adjusted, lighting is being prepared. Then suddenly, when the curtain opens, everything is ready. That's how God works. While you're waiting, he's arranging. While you're wondering, he's aligning. And when the time is right, everything will fall into place. Even when people try to remove him from society, God doesn't retreat. He remains. He doesn't argue for position. He holds his place. He holds his place. His kingdom is unshakable and his presence fills all things. He moves through conversations, through music, through moments, through miracles. He softens the hardest hearts and brings light into the darkest places. You might not see the evidence today, but trust that he is already setting things in motion. So don't let silence fool you. Don't let culture discourage you. Don't let slow progress make you lose hope. Even when God is pushed out, he's working behind the scenes. And when he steps into the open, when the curtain is pulled back, what he's been doing all along will leave you in awe. Because our God is faithful, our God is constant, and our God never stops working. Faith thrives in the fire. Opposition only makes it stronger. That's the nature of real tested faith. It doesn't shrink back when challenges come. It doesn't disappear when the pressure rises. In fact, faith often grows best when life feels the hardest. When everything around you says to give up and you choose to believe anyway, something powerful begins to take root. Faith is not fragile. It's not weak or dependent on comfort. Faith is like gold. It's purified in the fire. It's strengthened under resistance. It shines brighter when it's been through the heat. God never promised a life without struggle. He never said the journey would be easy. But what he did promise is that we would never go through it alone and that our trials would not be wasted. In the fire of adversity, he's building something inside you that comfort never could. Every storm, every setback, every rejection, these are the places where your faith learns how to stand, how to endure, how to trust when there's no obvious reason to. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were three young men who refused to bow to the culture around them. They stood firm in their faith, even when threatened with death. The fire was real. The opposition was intense, but their faith didn't wither. It didn't crack. It didn't compromise. And in the middle of that fiery furnace, something miraculous happened. God didn't just save them. He joined them. He joined them. He walked with them in the flames. That's what happens when faith stands in the fire. You begin to see God in ways you never would have otherwise. Sometimes we think that if our faith is strong enough, we won't face trouble. But it's often the strongest believers who walk through the most intense fires. Why? Because their faith can handle it. Because they've been through enough to know that the fire isn't there to destroy them. It's there to destroy them. It's there to reveal what's real. It burns away what's temporary. It exposes what's unshakable. The fire doesn't weaken you, it refines you. And on the other side, your faith is deeper, purer, and more powerful than ever before. Think about how muscles grow. They don't grow from rest alone. They grow from resistance, the pressure, the weight. The challenge is what creates strength. It's the same with faith. If you never had to believe for something beyond your control, you'd never discover what real faith feels like. If you never had to trust God in the middle of uncertainty, you wouldn't know the power of his peace. It's in the struggle that faith becomes alive. It's in the unanswered prayers, the long nights, and the silent seasons that you learn how to believe beyond what you see. When opposition comes, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Often, it means you're on the right track. The enemy doesn't fight what's not a threat. If your faith is under fire, it could be because it carries power. It could be because your obedience is shaking something in the spiritual realm. Don't run from that fire. Walk through it with confidence. Not because you're strong on your own, but because the one who is with you is stronger than anything against you. The early church understood this well. They were persecuted, imprisoned, threatened. But instead of folding under the pressure, their faith multiplied. The more they were opposed, the more the gospel spread. The more they were attacked, the more they relied on God. And the result was explosive growth, not just in numbers, but in boldness and joy and endurance. The fire didn't destroy the church, it fueled it. That same spirit lives in you. You might be in a fire right now. Maybe it's the fire of rejection or illness or financial pressure. Maybe it's criticism, betrayal, or disappointment. Whatever it is, you need to know this. The fire you're walking through is not the end of your story. It's not your defeat. It's your defining moment. This is where your faith is being shaped. This is where your roots are going deeper. This is where you're discovering who God really is, not just what you heard about him, but what you've experienced for yourself. The world may try to shake your faith. Circumstances may try to intimidate you. Voices may rise against you, but none of that can overpower the God within you. The fire may be hot, but it will not consume you. The opposition may be real, but it will not overcome you. You were built for this. You were chosen for this, and your faith is rising even now. Faith that thrives in the fire is the kind of faith that changes things. It moves mountains. It brings miracles. It refuses to bow to fear. And when people see that kind of faith in you, steady, unshaken, full of hope even in the hardest times, they won't just see you. They'll see the God who holds you. So keep standing. Keep believing. The fire is not a sign that you're losing. It's a sign that God is doing something powerful in you. Faith thrives in the fire, won't last forever, but the strength it produces in you will. God's promises outlast every attempt to silence his name. Throughout history, rulers have tried to erase him. Nations have risen in defiance. Nations have risen in defiance. Cultures have shifted, trends have come and gone, and voices have shouted against his truth. But still his word remains. Still his name is lifted. Still his promises are fulfilled one after another in the lives of those who dare to believe. You can't silence the one who created the universe. You can't cancel the eternal. You can't remove the God who was here before time and will still be standing long after the opinions of man have faded. There have been times when it looked like his name was being erased, times when believers were persecuted, Bibles were burned, churches were torn down, and faith was mocked. But in those very places, in those very moments, something powerful happened. His promises kept unfolding. His presence kept showing up. His spirit kept moving. You see, God's promises don't depend on popular approval. They don't fade with the headlines. They don't bow to politics, pressure, or resistance. What he said, he will do. What he started, he will finish. His word is not just ancient text. It's a living, breathing force that never returns empty. There are people who will try to shut down the message of hope. They'll say it's outdated, irrelevant, or too offensive. But truth doesn't expire. The world changes its mind every few years, but God never has to update his word. What he spoke to Abraham still carries power today. What he promised to Moses still stands. What he declared over David, over Isaiah, over Mary, over Paul, those words still echo with authority in life because God's promises are anchored in his character, and his character doesn't change. You may look around today and feel like faith is under attack. And feel like faith. Maybe you see the opposition growing louder and the message of Christ being pushed to the margins. But don't be discouraged. That's not the end of the story. God's promises have always outlasted the attempts to suppress his truth. Empires have crumbled. Dictators have passed. Philosophies have faded. But the gospel keeps moving forward. Why? Because it's not built on human strength. It's built on God's faithfulness. Every time someone tries to silence his name, his spirit finds another way to speak. They can remove prayer from public schools, but they can't stop a child from whispering, God help me, in the middle of a hard day. They can outlaw churches, but they can't outlaw faith. They can take away Bibles, but they can't take away the living word that's been written on hearts. You see, his promises are not confined to paper. They are alive in people. There's a reason why the enemy works so hard to suppress God's name, because there's power in it. Power to heal, to restore, to forgive, to deliver, to break chains and lift burdens. When people speak the name of Jesus, things shift. Darkness loses its grip. Hope rises. And no matter how hard this world tries to keep that name out of the conversation, it keeps coming back because God will not be silenced. His love will not be locked away. His mercy will not be hidden. Sometimes the attempt to silence God becomes the very thing that amplifies him. The early church faced extreme persecution. Believers were imprisoned, tortured, and killed. The goal was to crush the message. But the opposite happened. The message exploded. It spread from city to city, across continents and generations. Why? Because you can't kill a promise that came from God. You can't stop a purpose that heaven ordained. When God speaks something, it will come to pass, no matter who tries to stop it. His promises don't just survive opposition. They shine in it. They prove themselves when everything else is failing. When economies shake and governments shift, God's promise of provision still holds. When fear is broadcast from every screen, his promise of peace still calms hearts. When you're surrounded by voices saying it's impossible, his promise says all things are possible through him. His promises are not suggestions. They are unbreakable covenants backed by his power. If you're facing something right now that feels like opposition, if you feel like your faith is being challenged, like hope is hard to hold on to, remember this: the pressure around you doesn't cancel the promise within you. God's word over your life hasn't changed. His hand is still on you. What he said about your future, your healing, your family, your calling, it still stands. It doesn't matter who walks away or what the world says. His voice is louder. His truth is stronger. And his promises are eternal. Don't let temporary noise distract you from the everlasting truth. Don't let fear make you forget what he already promised. His name will never be erased. His love will never be defeated. And his word will never fail. So hold on, keep standing, keep believing, because while the world tries to silence his name, God is still speaking. And every word he's spoken over you will come to pass in its perfect time. His promises outlast everything, and that includes anything that tries to stand in their way. He's not finished just getting started with your life, your family, in this generation. You may look at where you are today and think it's too late. Maybe you've made too many mistakes, missed too many opportunities, or been through too much disappointment. Maybe your family is struggling and the world around you feels broken beyond repair. But what you see as the end, God sees as the beginning. What you call finished, he calls foundation. God doesn't walk away from messes. He moves into them. He doesn't abandon broken things. He rebuilds them with purpose and power. If you're still breathing, he's still working. If your heart is still beating, he's not done with you. God has a way of stepping into situations that seem hopeless and turning them into testimonies. That's what he's always done. He chose Moses after 40 years in the wilderness. He called David when he was just a forgotten shepherd boy. He picked Peter after he had denied him. He used Paul even though he once persecuted the church. Over and over again, God takes what looks unusable and breathes life into it. That means no matter where you are, no matter what your past looks like, no matter how far you feel from where you thought you'd be by now, he's just getting started. You may feel like your best days are behind you, like the dream you once had has faded, or the calling you sensed has been buried under responsibilities and pain. But God is not finished writing your story. He doesn't just rewind time. He redeems it. He knows how to restore the years you thought were wasted. He knows how to bring beauty out of ashes. He knows how to open new doors you never even imagined. Just because you haven't seen it yet doesn't mean it's not coming. His timing is not our timing, and his ways are higher than ours. But one thing is certain, he finishes what he starts. When you trust God with your life, you're not trusting someone who might figure things out. You're trusting the one who already sees the end from the beginning. He already knows how the pieces of your story will come together. And while it may not make sense right now, you can rest in the truth that he's working behind the scenes. He's setting things in place. He's lining up divine appointments. He's preparing your heart for what's ahead. The delay isn't denial, it's development. The waiting is shaping your strength, deepening your roots, and building your faith. God's not just getting started with your life, he's getting started with your family. Maybe you're the only one in your household trying to live a life of faith. Maybe the enemy has tried to bring division, addiction, confusion, or fear into your family. But God sees every tear you've cried. He hears every prayer you've prayed. He's not finished with your home. He is the God who restores relationships. He is the God who breaks generational curses and begins new legacies. You may not see the breakthrough yet, but it's coming. Keep standing, keep praying, and keep believing. God honors persistent faith, and what he starts in your family, he will bring to completion. And let's not forget, he's not finished with this generation. There's a lot of negativity out there. People say this generation is lost, confused, rebellious, distracted, but God sees potential. He sees leaders rising up. He sees hearts awakening. While the world is shouting fear and division, God is whispering identity and purpose into the hearts of young people. There's a stirring happening beneath the surface. A revival is building. A movement of worship, truth, and bold faith is forming. Don't let the noise make you miss the new thing God is doing. His Spirit is not done moving. His hand is not off this generation. He's just getting started. God often begins quietly. He doesn't always announce what he's doing with trumpets and headlines. Sometimes the most powerful things begin in stillness, in a personal moment of surrender, in a prayer whispered in the dark, in a single act of obedience. Don't despise small beginnings. Don't dismiss what looks insignificant, because that's where God does his best work. He doesn't need a spotlight to start a miracle. He just needs a heart that's willing. So wherever you are in your journey, lift your head. God hasn't given up on you. He hasn't changed his mind about your calling. He hasn't let go of the promises he made to you. What he spoke over you is still in motion. You may not have seen the fulfillment yet, but that doesn't mean he's finished. He's just getting started. The best is not behind you. It's ahead of you. The dream is not dead. It's waiting for its moment. The breakthrough is not impossible. It's already on its way. So take heart. Keep believing. Keep walking. The author of your story hasn't written the last chapter yet. And when he finishes what he's begun in your life, your family, in this generation, it will be more beautiful, more powerful, and more purposeful than you ever imagined.